Okay. Right. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully, everyone had a good weekend. We've had some excellent stuff so far from the practical side with Chico and Togs, and then something a little bit different with Scotty Davis and Ted. So this is the sort of first real kind of football theory side that we'll look at this morning. And I appreciate everyone's at kind of different levels with their development in terms of their knowledge of the game. Some people would have used the 5 lanes quite a lot growing up and over the last few years, and you'll probably be fairly comfortable with them. Some people will know about it, but this might be a little refresher for them, and others will. This might be something that's fairly new to you. So it's just it's one of the things that we use or we have used in training at times, and to sort of explain things about how we play. And I think that's really important that everybody sort of understands the ins and outs of it. So we'll get into it. So first of all, what are the 5 lanes? Well, you've all probably seen that image on the right with the pitch divided into 5. And the best way to kind of look at them, or how we can describe them, is if you imagine we're defending the goal at the bottom, attacking the goal at the top. And then when you look at the pitch, you look at it from left to right. And that's how you can sort of clarify which number's which. So if you look at it, we've got lane 1, lane 2, 3, 4, and 5. They've also got different names depending on who your coaches are, what your team's sort of philosophy is, or how their terminology is and what they want to say. So lane 1 and 5 could also be known as the wings. Lane 3 is also known as the centre. Lane 2 and 4 are also known as the half spaces. I'm sure you guys have come across that. This is just another sort of angle of it, but this time attacking down the pitch. So you can see you've got the different terminology with the right and left half space and the right and left wing central. The right wing on the picture is obviously still lane 5. It's just because obviously it's the way you're attacking, it's the way you look at it. And obviously the left wing is still lane 1, and then you've got right half spaces is 4, central 3, left half space is still number 2. So why are there 5 lanes? Why not 3? Why not 6? Why not 8? It was kind of agreed that if you divide the pitch into, or a max width of a pitch into equal lanes, so 5 equal lanes, which obviously 100 yards, 20 yards each. So you get those equal lanes there. And then after obviously a bit of time, it was noticed that, well, obviously in the centre of the pitch, there's generally a lot more play going on there. You've got a lot more bodies in there, so it doesn't seem right to have the same sort of size or emphasis put on that lane as it is as the half space, for example. So all that happens is the centre's made a little bit bigger, it's stretched out a bit more than it is in that picture there, and the half spaces are slightly smaller, and that's why there's a difference in sizes. Another way, and this is the way I was always kind of taught, was the most common use of a back line is a back 4. And even if you put like your 4 fingers up in front of you, there are 5 spaces in between those fingers, and there's 5 spaces in between those back 4. And it adds a bit of debate for analysts and coaches as to whether it's a fixed structure on a pitch, so the 5 lanes are just fixed, or whether the 5 lanes are dependent on the opposition's or the back 4's movement, so they change. I personally like to have the fixed structure, and I'll go on to why in a little bit, but it can be used in both ways. So you can see, obviously, you've got the 5 spaces in between those 4 defenders. We can also use it to position ourselves. So when we're looking at getting our structure, our initial structure, whether it's a goal kick, and obviously you can see in the image there that it's a basic 4-3-3, 4-1-4-1, very similar to what we used at the start of the season with the 2 10s and the 1-4. But you can also notice that in every lane you've got a player, outfield player, but also at the minute you've got 2 in each. And it's kind of like a little rule of thumb. If you can get no more than 2 in your starting positions, it means you've got different heights of the pitch covered as well as the full width. And it's also comes back to a little bit where we have asked our 2 10s in the game to maybe stay high and stay away from the ball. It's about holding a position, and the ball goes to the position rather than you go into the ball. So that could be used when you play into your number 5 and your number 2 there. and then you look to switch the play into the number 10 out the other side into then the 11. So it's just an easy way of keeping a bit more of a structure to your team. In terms of movement between the lines, it's also a big help for rotations. So, for example, if the number 8 was to make a run into lane 5, there would obviously be 3 players in there, too many bodies on the same line. So simply the 7 could move inside, or in this case, the number 2 could go inside. It's just working off each other's movements. Probably hear it sometimes, buzzing off each other's movement, and just making sure that you're covering all the lines, but also different depths of the lines as well. Another example might be the 7 on the ball, cuts inside, moves inside. And obviously at that point, the 8 would still be in there. So with him doing that, the 8 could recognise perhaps a little overlap onto the outside channel, because that's now where the space is. In the same move, you could have potentially the number 10 looks to move inside. And obviously, as he's going in, there'd probably be a lot of bodies centrally, defensively. So it could be that, well, if the 10 moves in, perhaps there's space in that half space for the number 9 to then move out. And it's just working off each other and making sure that you try and keep, 2 players in each line. Here's a great example. This is Leeds last season. So you can see that Phillips's position is there. He's actually in the same line as his teammates. That's lane 4, so the right half space. And the problem this gives you is that at the minute, the opposition, they can defend that quite easily. So if you look at the pass options, you've got potentially the pass into the right winger at the bottom of the picture. But then the 22 is doing 2 jobs. He's blocking the pass, but he's also screening that space in behind. You've also then got the 7 in there for the Reds. He's looking at blocking that pass, so it's quite difficult at the minute to thread that ball through. And then if the pass goes into Phillips's feet, he could be doubled up by the defender behind and also this player in front. So the only real pass that he has on at this point is to go backwards into the centre-back, which is obviously exactly what Middlesbrough want. So if you just look at the difference in the movement straight away, what this does with Phillips moving out there, it causes more issues. So you've still got the 22 doing 2 jobs and probably blocking that pass. But if you notice now, because Phillips has now moved inside, this defender here, the striker, he's not going with him, which now sort of entices the middle guy, the middle presser, to keep his eyes fixed on the ball. And it's actually then opened up a little bit more of a space there. So he has got a difficult pass if he threads between that one there. But what actually happens in the move is the pass ends up going into Helder Costa, who can then set back into Phillips. And at that point, you've now taken 4 defenders out of the game. So the 4 Reds in that picture are now out of the game, and they've broken the press. And that's come from just purely recognising the positioning and making sure that you've not got more than 2 players in the same line. And it goes back to what Martin's probably said to a lot of you quite a lot this season, is the ball, if you're a midfielder and you look to go towards the ball when the fullback's got it, you take the pressure with you. But as the pressure goes there, you go the other way. So at the minute, he's going towards the ball. And then as soon as he recognises the pressure's there, he moves away from the ball. And then straight away, you're in a better position now to then go and attack in other spaces. And that's how a simple way of getting out. Using positional play, obviously the biggest advocate for it, Pep Guardiola. That most of you have probably seen that quote. But move the opponent, not the ball. Invite the opponent to press. You have the ball on one side to finish on the other side. So it's just quite simple of recognising it's not necessarily the space. It's actually how we can move the opposition players. And then if you can move on one side, then you've obviously then got the space on the other side. How we can attack using the lanes. So in a basic 4-1-4-1 or 4-3-3 structure, you tend to get to the halfway line and your shape will become something like this, a 2-3-5 or potentially a 3-2-5 if the number 4 drops between the 2 centre-backs. And you can see this is with the full-backs moving inside and keeping your wingers nice and high and wide and pushing your 2 10s higher up. And then exactly the same structure, but this time you can see the positioning is different. So the wingers now moved inside, the fullbacks have now pushed really high, and the 10 and 8 have dropped a little bit deeper. So the structure can be the same, but the personnel and their positioning is obviously slightly different. You could obviously stagger it. So if you've got a really good attacking left back, for example, he might go and play high and wide, and the right back might be more of a centre back. He might tuck inside, so it can look different on each half of the pitch, but the structure kind of stays the same. And it's really important that you have that front five, because obviously 5 lanes, you want to occupy every single lane. So then we get into this situation, which I'm sure everybody's been in, where we're up against the yellows and they're nice and compact on one side of the pitch. And at this point, you look and you think, right, you've got 5 lanes, we've got 5 attackers, they've got a back 4, which means there's always going to be 1 lane spare. And that is the lane that we want to attack. Now, in this situation, you might think it's quite obvious to go, well, the number 2, he's in lane 5, there's no pressure in there. What you'll see is you might hit the big diag. Now, that might be good if you're 15, 20 yards deeper on the pitch, because that might get you higher up the pitch and into a better attacking position. But when you're trying to penetrate the final third and really hurt teams, you know what will happen in this point. When you switch that ball, as defenders always say, when the fullback's tucked in, as the ball travels, we can get out there. So you end up getting that situation. And then you've still got 4 defenders in that corner, if you like, against 3 attackers. So you still got to do a job of crossing the ball and then attacking from a corner. So it's not necessarily the best way to attack in that situation. What we want to try and do, if we take it back to there, is you want to really try and attack the 3 middle lanes. So lane 2, 3 and 4, because they're obviously the closest to the goal. So you might still need to switch the play, because you know that lane 5 is still spare. So you need to put the ball in that direction, but perhaps shorter passes maybe into midfield. And as you do that, you just sort of attract the opposition players over to that space, because they recognise the space is on that side. They want to go and mark the 2 because they know the switch might happen. As it happens, and it happens with a lot with back 4s and with back 3s, is you're looking for the kink in the chain. So you're looking for the one that gets caught ball watching or is slow to react. And as that happens with the 6 and the 3 moving over, potentially maybe the 5 is slow to react for them. So what you might then do is put the play the other way, keep the passes short in the middle, and then you're looking to attack that space there. And that's, the spare lane might be lane 3 at that point. It could be that 5 moves over, but the 2 doesn't, and actually the 11 or the 3 for us could now attack that lane 2. So it's just about looking at where the opposition are. There's 5 lanes, there's 4 defenders, attack the spare lane. We want to make that spare lane one of the 3 in the middle. And how you do that is by short, intricate passing and then killer runs, diagonal runs, things like that. Just a little example of over games in the years where that's happened. The other way you can use it is, obviously, we've talked about moving them side to side, but it's also to bring players out, and you've got yourself in a structure and you want to attack the lanes still, but actually they're not stepping out. So how you could do that, if you look at the number 7 in the image, we talk about our 2 wide players potentially at times going and playing in those little pockets. And it's not just a case of can you get on the ball, turn and attack. Obviously, if that happens, then great. But really what you're trying to probably look for is to try and entice that centre-back to do this, to try and step out with you. Because now what you've created is a massive space between their fullback, the number 3, and the number 5. So when you bring that player out and you attract him out into that space, you then might have to play little combinations, whether it's an up, back, through, or the 3rd man run, which we worked on the other week when we were at Cox Green. That was something Martin was heavily talking about how we can use the 3rd man run, how we can attack those spaces with better passes without fizzing it necessarily too much and it runs off the pitch. It needs to perhaps go into where the 8 plays into the 2. It's probably got to be into his path, so as he's running onto it, and then he can attack lane 4 there, and that's just another way of using it. Obviously, perhaps one of the best teams attacking half spaces is Man City. This will happen all the time where Bernardo's on the ball there, and you can see the pass isn't necessarily going into the half space, it's actually going in behind. But the run is a penetrative run through the half space. So rather than De Bruyne standing next to Robertson or next to Van Dijk and then running in and attracting that pressure towards the ball, he's just more disciplined in his position in that space, and then he's looking to get into that pocket. Something you'll see a lot is the use of 3-man combinations out wide. So if you go back to the attacking structure that we put up a minute ago, you'll remember there was normally 3 players in those wider areas, or in this picture, lane 4 and 5. And you can see at the top, you've got Walker, De Bruyne, and Bernardo that are playing out as the 3-man combination. Even though there's more defenders in that picture than there is attackers, their positions are better. So that means they can do more damage. So you can see at the bottom picture, pass out to Bernardo. It's that same one we saw a second ago. And then he's looking for the run into the half space, little ball in behind. And then De Bruyne does one of his typical trademark crosses. And I think they score from that. That was against Spurs last season, for any Spurs fans on here. You could also see that if you go back to the top left, the structure could stay the same, but the personnel could be different. You know, it could very easily be Kyle Walker that's playing where Bernardo is. Bernardo could very easily go to De Bruyne. De Bruyne could very easily go there. And it's about being flexible with that. So it's not a case of, I'm a right back, I need to play in this position, or I'm a striker, I need to play in this position. It's playing to the structure of the team and being flexible with it. And this is why it's important for everyone to know this, because it's not a case of it's just the attacker, it's defenders as well. Or it could be 1 week you're playing left back, next week you're playing right back, and you've got to be able to do this job. Little question for you guys, and feel free to put your answers perhaps in the chat box if that's easier, rather than everybody jumping on with their mics. This one's a very easy one. Which lane, if your Leeds at the minute, they're in the grey, they're attacking to the right, which lane is spare right now when you look at those defenders? So just, you can put it whether you want to put 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or whether you want to say the half space or the centre or the wing. It's up to you.
Don't be afraid to make mistakes, gents. Just throw some answers in there.
Okay. Donald said the half space. Sol lane 2, second lane from Pierce. Any more? Half space 2, left half space Felix. Okay, yeah. So that is the lane 2, or the left half space. Okay. If you just say half space, it could, you know, it's the only one in the picture, so it's easy. But you know, it is the left half space or lane 2. So that was a nice easy one. How about now? Which lanes are spare? You have a minute to have a look, work it out.
I think you can clear those annotations, Jack, as well. If you look somewhere, maybe go to options. Otherwise, they'll probably be on every slide from the end till the end.
Yeah, I'll have a little look. Disable participants annotations. Oh no. So we've got a couple of answers. I'll have a look at that in a sec. A couple of answers. Third lane. Any more? Sol says 2 and 5. Right half space. 4 and 5. Okay. So for me, there's definitely more than one. If you have a look, I actually think lane 1 is spare because they're right on the borderline with the ball, and there isn't actually any defenders in lane 1. So the number 43 could easily do a little overlapping run and get the ball in that space. Lane 2, you could argue that there is a space there between the right back and the centre back, because this player might make a little run in between. You could also say, as the play develops, perhaps this defender will drop in alongside him, which obviously blocks lane 2. So that might be something to think about. Lane 3, which is obviously the centre, I think is heavily occupied. Lane 4 is empty, and we can't see in the picture, but I'm pretty sure lane 5 will be empty in this situation as well. So you've actually got quite a few. And the reason why I said before, I like to have it as a structured line as opposed to where the defence are. Because if you put it on the defence movement right here, you've got, yes, lots of space in lane 1, lots of space in lane 2. Lane 3, there's a small space, but if you look at lane 4, like how small that space would be, that wouldn't be worth obviously attacking. So that's why I like to use it as a 5 lanes. You might obviously have a situation where teams play a back 5, so you might be thinking, well, how do you use it that way? Well, if you did it with the player example, like I just said, then I suppose you've got 6 spaces in between, but they're still going to be very small. So it's still the same principles, whether you can move a player in lane 5, and probably that's where you have to draw people out as opposed to moving them side to side. So yeah, if you said any of those lanes, then you are correct. Last one, I don't know how to get rid of that. Let me say clear. Is that what I do? Clear all. Yeah, there you go. So on this one, you can see that it's slightly different. So which lanes would you say are spare in this picture? Again, don't be afraid to make a mistake or to go wrong. It's just purely checking your knowledge, your understanding. This is obviously Barcelona attacking towards the left. Okay, so have a look and we'll see which lanes you feel are free from what you guys can see. Delson 1 and 5. Janae lane 4. Patel 1, 3 and 4. 1 and 4. They're off. Sol says 1. Felix 1 and 2. 1 and 4 again. Pierce lane 2 between the triangle of defenders. Yeah, that's a good spot, if you like. That's probably more of a little pocket, I would say, that little triangle of defenders. But yeah, that's definitely a space where you can position yourself. So for me, looking at it, you could easily say, well, the left back or the left winger in this picture could drop, and then lane 5 is no longer spare, but there is enough space there where you could class it as spare. Lane 4, there's probably a very small space that you could penetrate. Maybe Neymar could make a little run into that space. Lane 3, I think, is heavily bodied. There's lots of players in there, so you're not going to find much space there. Lane 2, I would say that there's a bit in behind this defender. And then lane 1, we can't see, but knowing the image, I know that lane 1 is free as well. But I'm just going to take this on a bit further. So from this goal, and I don't know if anyone remembers this game. This was the Copa del Rey final a few years ago. And Barcelona won. I can't remember the final score, whether it was 3-0, 3-1. But everybody remembers the goal from the first half from Messi, where he picks the ball up near enough on the right-hand touchline, runs all the way down the wing, beats about 4 players, and then smashes it into the near post. But this is actually the very start of his second goal in that game. And not many people really remember it. But I think it's quite important, or just as important for the team as that first goal in terms of looking at it. So just a few seconds before this picture, what actually happened was Neymar, Suarez and Messi, they were stood in a line just here, in line with the referee and their defender. They were a single straight line. And you think that's their front three. You'd think their front three would be one out wide, one in the middle, or maybe slightly inside for the wingers. But they were just stood right next to each other as a 3. And they're obviously the 3 most dangerous players on the pitch. And what that did, you can see what it did to Bilbao's back 4, because they were playing a back 4, not a back 5 in that game. That's the right back, the 2 centre backs in there, and the left back. You can see how narrow those 4 are just from those 3 going and standing there, and it's forced their 2 wide players to go and stand much deeper. And what actually happens is I'll take it on, and the picture isn't as good because it was just a screenshot. Hang on. So this is just a moment later. So the ball's ended up down the right wing, and it might be difficult to see, but that's Dani Alves running down the wing at the minute. And that's Messi on the edge of the box here. And I'll tell you, Messi scores. And if you think about how he can score from that situation, be quite interesting, because I think a lot of you, and maybe if I first saw this, I would probably say, well, Dani Alves will probably smash a ball across the box in that maybe corridor of uncertainty, and Messi will get there for the tap-in. And that's not what happens. It's key to note at this point, Messi is basically walking on the edge of the box. He's not even once, when you guys, if you want to go and have a look at the goal afterwards, I didn't put the video on because the videos on Zoom are quite jumpy. But if you look at the goal afterwards, Messi never looks up at the ball. He never makes eye contact with Dani Alves. Dani Alves only ever looks at the ball. He's never looking at what's happening in the box. And Messi's run then goes inwards as soon as the ball's played. So he now goes and runs into that space there. Again, he hasn't ever looked up, Dani Alves. And then it ends up coming into that situation. This is just after Messi's touched the ball. You can see the ball's slightly just there, and he's gone and finished near post. And this was a goal that I analysed a few years ago, and it kind of comes back to, is that something off the cuff, or is that something that's been worked on pre-planned? Because the fact that Messi, as amazing, as great as he is as a player, Dani Alves hasn't even looked. And what he's done is he's just put the ball into a little space here. Now, in that situation, you wouldn't probably pass it there. But Messi's already made that movement, and he's gone into that space. So it comes back to me, probably pre-planned moves. So not necessarily saying, yes, we're going to do this pattern, this move today. It's probably just from being on the training pitch and repetition of so many different moves and so many different patterns. And perhaps in that situation, they've done that one so many times where Messi makes that little near post run, Dani Alves puts it in that area. That's all he's looking to do. And then they score from it. So I just thought I'd share that one. Obviously, defending with the lanes, some coaches, some managers, they'll use the 5 lanes more for the defensive side. Some will use it more for an attacking side. The clearest way that you guys probably learned about the lanes with us this season was initially defending and making sure that we defend 3 lanes. If the ball moves central, you defend the 3 middle lanes. If it moves out to the side, then you obviously defend the 3 lanes on that side. So you can just see there, the Blues are defending, and that's how the clear image of that. So what you don't want to happen is what we said earlier on, where the yellows can play into midfield and manipulate the ball in small spaces, small passes, and then look to draw one of our centre-backs over or out, or catch one sleeping to then penetrate. By having more players in there, hopefully that will stop that happening. And it means all that will happen is probably either pass go backwards, pass goes to the side, or that big diagonal happens. And we spoke about that. If the diagonal happens, then everyone should be able to go over. And just something different, and I actually put this on before the City-Liverpool game yesterday, because I watched the Southampton game on Friday, and they play with a 4-2-2-2, mostly out of possession. And you can see with the Blues there, it's not quite a normal 4-4-2, because in a 4-4-2, the 11 and the 7 would be probably in line with the 2 in midfield, and it'd be quite easy then for the back 4 of the Yellows to play around and go forward. But what they actually do, Southampton, and funny enough, Liverpool, particularly in that first 20 minutes yesterday in that game, for anyone who saw, the front 2, their job is, when the centre-backs have the ball, is to stop the pass going into the 4, but they also want to force the play into wider areas. They don't want them to be able to get their head up and play over the top. So they still press them enough so that they can keep their head down, but they're not going necessarily gun-ho so that you can just play around him. So they look to play or force it into wider areas. The 7 and 11, they play and position themselves in the half spaces. So they're not actually necessarily marking anybody, but what they're trying to do is, when the 6 steps into the half space, they stop the ball going into the half space. So they stop the 10 getting it. They stop if anybody else was to move inside. They make sure that the pass goes into this area here. And then once they do that, this happens with the press. So the back 4 move over, the midfield tuck over and can be on the front foot and quite aggressive. The 9 you can see has dropped in one, and he's now on to the number 4, so the pass can't go into him. The 11's obviously tucked in because you want to try and defend lesser lanes. And then the 10 is stopping the pass back to the 6. And you can see with the 8, 9, 10 and 7, that's actually become a bit like a diamond press on the side. And it would go the other way. So when the ball goes out and it goes into this side, the difference there would be the 9 would be on the 5, the 10 drops on to the 4, and they just set a trap. They just set a wide trap like that. So it's just a bit different, because it seems to be a trend at the minute for teams to play with suddenly a 4-4-2. You know, when Sean Dyche does it, he's a dinosaur. When Klopp does it, he's a genius. Or Hasenhüttl. But there is different context to it. So when Liverpool did it yesterday and when Southampton did it on Friday night, like I said, the 11 and the 7 were not dropping and conceding space. They were still staying high. They play a high press game using that. So it's just something different. Obviously, we haven't played really with a 4-4-2 or 4-2-2-2 or something like that this season, but it might be something that pops up at some point, particularly if it becomes trendy, because everybody knows when Chelsea started playing back three, England started playing back three, everybody else started playing a back three. So coaches out there, teams who we come up against might play this system, and it's just being aware of it and improving your tactical knowledge, because unfortunately we are at a level where maybe our natural talent hasn't been enough to put us to that next level or get us to where we want to be. So it's really important you guys become more studious students of the game. You start learning the ins and outs, because the more knowledge you know, the better it will make you as a player in the long term. And maybe just a little task to go away. It's not an official one, so you don't have to do it. But if you have time over the next week or so, and you're a bit bored and you want to improve your tactical knowledge or your knowledge on the 5 lanes, then maybe do some or research or look at some games, analyse some games, even if it's our games again, and just look at maybe how we used the 5 lanes. Did we use them well enough? How we could have maybe hurt the opposition more by using them. Did we defend well in them? And then just start, recognising it. If you can start to see it in when you analyse, then hopefully you'll start to see it quicker in games. But if there's any questions, again, you can either put your mic on now or put it in the chat, or if any of the staff want to pop up and say anything. Otherwise, thank you.
Cheers, Jack.
No worries.
Cheers, Jack. Thank you.
Any questions?
Cheers, Jack.
Yeah. Was that new to anyone, any of that? No, so you all were masters of understanding it before.
Good stuff. Jack's recorded it as well, so if you want to look back over that, we've just created a YouTube channel, so the videos, etc., that